All right, hello everybody. This is the Fantasy Sports Boss with another Fantasy Sports Boss podcast for you. It is Saturday, January 4th, 2025. Hit that subscribe button if you're new to the channel. Also, send your emails to rangerfan28 at yahoo.com. That's the Fantasy Sports Boss email address where you could send me some questions that I will use on the podcast. I got some emails I'm going to go through today. Also, going to give you some picks for the games tomorrow. We do have two games this afternoon. Or by the time you see this, because this will be a Saturday night premiere, the Browns-Ravens game should be finished, and then we're on to the Bengals-Steelers. So the Bengals have a small chance. They need a lot of help to get into the playoffs, but at least the game has some juice to it. Of course, tomorrow, the big one. We went over the schedule yesterday and yesterday's podcast, so make sure you check that out. The Lions playing the Vikings, winning the NFC North and getting the number one seed. The loser dropping to the fifth seed, so that's a pretty significant drop. And if both teams tend to do, Jared Goff especially does his best work at home in the dome there, so it would be imperative for them to get the win there. So as far as today is concerned, I'm going to start the off season because it is the off season for fantasy football. You should not be playing any fantasy football contests this weekend. Should be all over now. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to start doing during these podcasts rehashes, like summaries of players, their performance in 2024, what I think of them going forward, whether they were profitable this year or they went down in the bust bin, all of those things. We're going to take a player from each of the four positions. Going to do Kyler Murray today, James Cook, Terry McLaurin, and Jonnu Smith. And then, like I said, also go through some emails before we call it a day here on the podcast. So, and again, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. There's going to be a lot of podcasts this off season. We have NFL free agency coming up, the playoffs. We're going to do the NFL draft, a lot of draft stuff, the NFL combine eventually in the off season. I'm also going to delve into some other stuff, any other topics that I'm, there's more freedom for me on here during the off season. But it still will be predominantly fantasy football. But I might delve into some other things, other sports and topics, things that are going on, current events wise. So make sure you tune in for all of that. So now, as far as today is concerned, like I said, we're going to start with Kyler Murray. And again, I want to go through all of the key players in fantasy football. And we got a long off season to do this. And certainly values are going to fluctuate throughout the course of the year. We haven't even gotten to free agency. There's going to be a lot of coaching changes. The coaching carousel, we're going to see a lot of names fall by the wayside. Here in New York, there's growing chatter that Brian Daboll could be fired for the Giants while Joe Schoen will remain the GM. So that's something at least that the rumor mill is starting to swell, and certainly the Jets are going to be looking for a new coach as well. The Jets just interviewed Mike Vrabel and Ron Rivera, and they will interview Rex Ryan. And here's the thing, Mike Tannenbaum is heading the search for the next Jets coach. Tannenbaum has his own company that services NFL teams in terms of hiring personnel, GMs, and coaches. And Mike Tannenbaum was the one who brought in Rex Ryan originally. And Ryan's tenure, really using Eric Mangini's players, was successful early on, and then his shtick grew old, and the last 3 or 4 years there weren't good before he was fired. He was feuding with John Idzik, the GM, who had eventually replaced Mike Tannenbaum. So it's interesting that Tannenbaum is conducting the search and that Rex Ryan is one of the candidates. And certainly with Ryan, you're going to get a lot of bombast, you're going to get a lot of outlandish narcissism, arrogance, all that stuff, which sells well in New York, but there's really a short shelf life when it comes to that stuff. You better keep winning or it's going to get old real quick. So he's up there. I think Mike Vrabel is the clear top guy this offseason other than Ben Johnson. And, Ben Johnson was weird last year. He didn't interview well. There was reports that he was asking for some perks and things of that nature. But he's still, based on the ultra success of the Detroit Lions offense, he's going to be a key guy during this hiring cycle, as will Pete Carroll, who wants to get back into the league as well. The whatever college coaches are interested in coming back, and Bill Belichick is taking himself out of the running by becoming the coach at North Carolina. And I always wondered, though, like if an NFL team, came calling, like let's say the Dallas Cowboys fire Mike McCarthy, and then they call Belichick and like, hey, listen, we want you to coach a team. Does Belichick listen? I would think that he would. Like he would rather probably coach in the NFL than he would at North Carolina. So that's an interesting situation there as well. So we just got to see what goes on there with the coaching carousel. Now, Kyler Murray. So we're going to start with Kyler Murray. We're going to rehash Kyler Murray's 2024. This past summer, I gave you two names at the quarterback position that I thought were screaming values. It was Joe Burrow as quarterback 7, which I've said numerous times, and Kyler Murray was another one as QB 10. And Matthew Berry, who's the fantasy GOAT, who I have all the respect in the world for, his ride or die was Kyler Murray. All right? He was all in on Kyler Murray. And I have to say, for me as well, I thought Kyler Murray was a really good value at QB 10. They brought in Marvin Harrison Jr. in the draft, the premier receiver coming out that year. They had a burgeoning star in tight end Trey McBride, underrated James Conner at running back to help take pressure off of Murray there. And the fact that Murray is also a runner, really strong runner, and looked good the second half of last year coming back from his knee injury, it really a nice buying opportunity was at hand when it came to Murray. Unfortunately, being drafted as QB 10, Murray after week 17, and that's when you should be judging statistics, through week 17. All right, not through the end of the season, because week 18, a lot of these stars are not playing, so it's skewing the where they finished in the rankings there. Kyler Murray after week 17 is QB 12. So he was a bust. He was a slight bust. You didn't get what you expected value-wise out of Kyler Murray because you drafted him as QB 10, and he winds up QB 12. So, the numbers. Let's look at the numbers. 17 passing scores, 11 interceptions, 3,609 yards. Not a good ratio at all. 17 touchdown passes is a very low number, and he hasn't missed a start. 11 interceptions is a high rate. So that ratio is pretty crappy. On the plus side, 550 rushing yards and 5 scores. So the touchdowns, even when you combine the rushing score with the passing touchdowns, it's not a good number. 22 altogether between the running and the pass. I mean, Josh Allen does that in half a season. So it was disappointing. And here's the other thing with Kyler Murray, and I've said this numerous times over the years. His trend, and I don't know if it's because he's small, the hits might take a toll on him as the season goes on. His trend is to wear down as the season goes on. All right? He does that almost every year, and this year was no exception. He had 7 games of 20-plus fantasy points this year in PPR. 6 points per touchdown pass. That's how I play it. You want minimum of 20 from your fantasy quarterback, right? In a 6-point touchdown, passing touchdown setup. Murray got there 7 times in 16 games. Okay? The first half of the season, 11 touchdown passes, 3 interceptions. So that was good. Second half of the season, 6 passing touchdowns, 8 interceptions. His last 6 games, week 12, 10 fantasy points. Week 13, 17. Week 14, 21. That was good. Week 15, again, 10. Week 16, 22, pretty good. And week 17, 18. So, 4 of his final 6 games, he did not reach 20 fantasy points. Disappointing. Berry has said how disappointed he was in Murray. And, for me, next year, he's probably going to be drafted again in that 8 to 10 range. But I'm out. Marvin Harrison Jr. was very disappointing as a rookie. A lot of that has to do with Murray. Trey McBride was great, but 1 receiving touchdown, that's on Murray to a certain extent as well. Murray can't see over the line, so he's got to move around in the pocket. It throws off the timing of routes. That hurt Harrison more because at least when Murray's rolling out, he can hit McBride on the short to either intermediate passes. That's more of a struggle when he's on the move trying to throw it down the field to Harrison. It just didn't work. And also the offense in general, it was not an impressive... I wasn't happy with the way this offense was run. And again, you could blame Kyler Murray for that to a certain degree. So he went down as a disappointment. I'm not chasing him next year in single quarterback leagues. I'm over it. I was intrigued because of the price this year, but he didn't even make that price back. So Kyler Murray, firmly disappointing for me. He's going to have the same cast of characters back next year. Connor, McBride, Harrison. We'll see what happens there. I don't expect much in the way of improvement, though. All right, now, on the more positive side, we have James Cook, running back 9 in PPR at this very moment. Here's what's interesting with James Cook. His first 2 years in the league was really... He wasn't given goal line duty. That was either Josh Allen on keepers, Allen 15 rushing touchdowns in 2023, or Latavius Murray. All right? I believe Cook only had 2 rushing touchdowns each of his first 2 years in the league. Going back to his time in college at Georgia, Cook wasn't even a bell cow back. Like, he was no more for his receiving. He was an explosive back, but he wasn't used like a high touch starter. His best work was coming in the receiving game. He was no more for catching the ball than running it coming out of college. And that was the kind of touch profile he had his first 2 years in the league. Very little in the way of goal line carries. Caught the ball well, over 40 catches his second year in the league. Explosive ability, his yards per rush were impressive. But just wasn't given that opportunity to be the guy. Then the Bills go out and they draft Ray Davis. They have Ty Johnson as well, who, with the Jets, did some nice things in limited time. And then you have Josh Allen, who, again, is going to keep the ball a ton around the goal line because it works. So that's going to steal touchdowns away from James Cook. But all that being said, the Bills, Sean McDermott said prior to the season, James Cook's going to be our goal line guy. And he lived up to that promise. 981 rushing yards, 15 rushing touchdowns. That is a monstrous number for a running back. 5 yards per carry. Excellent season from James Cook. He was terrific. Every sense of the game, he was terrific running the football. If you want to quibble a little bit, it was in the receiving game. Cook dropped off in the receiving game. 32 catches, 258 yards, 2 touchdowns. Yardage was solid, but Cook is capable of being an every year 50-plus catch guy. But again, a running quarterback, Josh Allen, he's not going to throw it underneath when he can just keep the ball himself and run with it. We've seen this over and over again. This is one of the most tried and true trends in fantasy football. When you have a mobile quarterback, they don't throw to their running back that much. Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts. Look at Saquon Barkley. As incredible MVP fantasy season that Saquon Barkley had this year, he didn't catch the ball at a high rate. And this is a guy who caught 91 passes as a rookie with the Giants. He is absolutely capable of leading the league in catches out of the running back position. But Hurts, as a mobile quarterback, would rather keep it. Same thing with Lamar. Same thing with Allen. And that hurts James Cook to a certain extent. But, man, I said this too. James Cook was one of the best investments of the season because he was a bell cow back with all those rushing touchdowns who came in the 4th round. That's tremendous value. He was on more than a few fantasy winning rosters. Derrick Henry and James Cook were 2 backs along with Bijan and Barkley, the 4 backs really, that were on the most championship teams, those 4 guys. James Cook was terrific. Now, 2025, he's going to be a lot more expensive. He's going to be a 2nd round pick. I think the 15 rushing touchdowns are a little bit of an outlier. Josh Allen is going to be back taking a lot of touchdowns for himself, a lot of keepers around the goal line. That's just how he rolls. That's part of the Buffalo offensive game plan. So that is not an exclusive domain for James Cook. Plus, you have Ray Davis, who looked really good as a rookie. He has power. He has underrated speed. He could catch the ball out of the backfield. Ray Davis has 3-down ability. He's going to get more work next year. So, I think James Cook could be slightly overvalued next year, 2025. I think he could be slightly overvalued, but late second round, I'm still buying. Just keep in mind, 15 rushing touchdowns may be tough to duplicate, but he was a smashing success this year. And I think he proved himself capable of being that every down guy, and he didn't wear down. Week 15, 26 PPR points. Week 16, 27 PPR points. And then the Bills blew out the Jets in Week 17 championship week. And Cook scored, but just wasn't really needed that much. But he was a big, big, big weapon the first two rounds of the fantasy playoffs, which capped his great season. It really was a terrific year for him altogether. So, good things there with James Cook. All right, Terry McLaurin, wide receiver 8 in PPR leagues. Came in 2019, caught 7 touchdowns as a rookie. Looked like the sky was the limit. This guy, terrific athleticism, big play guy, good speed, good hands, looked to be the next star. And for the next 4 years, we were drafting him with the expectation that Terry McLaurin is very capable of being a wide receiver 1 on talent. At worst, a wide receiver 2. The problem for McLaurin is the Commanders from 2019 through 2023 had some of the worst quarterback play in the entire NFL that helped to hold back McLaurin's potential. In McLaurin's defense, he still was really consistent as a high-end wide receiver 3, but that's as far as it got. He was good for his 75 catches, 1,000 yards, and 5 touchdowns almost every year after 2019 when he caught those 7 touchdowns. You could take it to the bank. Those were the numbers. That was as good as McLaurin could possibly produce with such shoddy, awful, disgusting quarterback play. It was an absolute disgrace, some of that quarterback play from the Commanders over the years with McLaurin. Enter Jaden Daniels and his ridiculous accuracy, big play potential, big arm, great athlete, the real deal. And McLaurin, right now, 74 catches, 1,034 yards, 12 touchdowns. Now, I know he unbelievably face-planted in championship week against the Falcons when the Commanders and Jaden Daniels went bonkers altogether on offense. McLaurin was nowhere to be found. But prior to that, 11 of 16 games, 15 PPR points at least, which is very, very impressive consistency. But also we have to keep in mind, the 74 catches for 1,034 yards was pretty much on par with what McLaurin has always done. That hasn't changed. He is not Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's not Justin Jefferson as far as the yards and the raw reception totals. He's just not that guy. I think we're so far down the tracks now we can say concretely that this is who McLaurin is. The reason why he became wide receiver 8, though, is because the touchdown numbers jumped up by a sizable margin with Jaden Daniels this year. And I think next year he could be a wide receiver 2 again. I don't think he's a wide receiver 1 in PPR. I just don't. I don't think the raw catches and yardage are going to be there enough to justify that. Okay? But really, really good season for a guy who did not cost you that much during the draft this past summer. It was just impressive stuff there. All right, one of my favorites, Jonnu Smith, tight end 4. I spoke in the last podcast when I wrapped up the tight ends. Make sure you check that out. Brock Bowers was the single greatest draft pick of anybody, any position in the 8th round. The number 1 tight end. When you can get the most shallow position, the top guy in the 8th round, you're winning leagues. But I wouldn't say a close second, but second in terms of smashing value was Jonnu Smith at tight end. He finished tight end 4 when his season really didn't get going until mid-October. 79 catches, 828 yards, 7 touchdowns. Only 3 of his first 9 games he hit double digits in PPR. But down the stretch, last 7 games, double digits in PPR in all 7. 4 of those 19 or more fantasy points. This is from your tight end 4. Perhaps we should have seen this coming. Smith dropped weight. He's Very fast for a tight end. He's a yards after catch tight end in the George Kittle mode. Remember last year, we were all killing Arthur Smith. How is it that Jonnu Smith is outproducing Kyle Pitts, arguably the greatest athlete to ever come out of tight end? How is this happening? Arthur Smith is such a dipshit that he can't even unlock Kyle Pitts, and he's playing Jonnu Smith. Well, seeing how bad Pitts was again this year and how incredible Jonnu Smith was, that might not have been a fluke. Mike McDaniel knows offense. He knew how to unlock Jonnu Smith. And if Mike McDaniel is back next year, there's some rumors that he may not be back, which I think is ridiculous. If he's back next year, I am all in on Jonnu Smith. Okay? I'm not sure what the contract situation is. I have to look. I don't know if he's a free agent at the end of the year, but the Dolphins got to bring him back. And here's the thing, too. His value is going to be affordable again. He's not getting drafted ahead of Mark Andrews or Kelsey or Laporta or McBride or Bowers. All those guys are going, or Kittle, all those guys are going ahead of him. I just gave you 6 guys. You could wait and get Jonnu Smith. Remember, Pat Freiermuth, Ferguson, and Njoku, all of those guys have similar value. You can't rank any of them ahead of one another. They're all similar. So I think your best course of action is go Jonnu Smith. Be a little bit more aggressive before that group of tight ends arrives in the draft and take Jonnu Smith. He was unbelievable down the stretch. And if he's back with Miami next year, I know, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are back on the field. There's not enough catches to go around. Baloney. Jalen Waddle has been nothing but inconsistent. Tyreek Hill looks like he took a step back. He lost a step this past season. Injuries are going to continue to crop up as he continues to age. Jonnu Smith is going to remain a thing. So, I think that Jonnu Smith is somebody that I'm absolutely going to be in on next year. I want Trey McBride, but I don't think he'll make it to the 3rd round when I would consider him. Travis Kelce, I would consider in round 4 because I think he's still productive, even though the touchdowns have fallen off the map. I've never been a Kittle guy just because of all the injuries. I'm really in on Jonnu Smith again this year, as you should be as well. So let me know what you think about these guys. Hit the message board there. All right, during the premiere too, you can add your thoughts in the chat as well. All right, gonna take a second for one of our sponsors here, oddsflex.com. So, if you're into betting, if you're into sports betting, oddsflex.com is your place to go. Betting arbitrage. All right? If you're into betting, you know what this is. This is a growing thing. Betting arbitrage, where you I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly too, where you scan, where you have this software that scans all of the various betting sites, the books, the DraftKings, the FanDuel, all of them, searching for inequalities, such as today, Duncan Robinson, over 12 points in FanDuel, under in DraftKings. All right? Different odds. When sportsbooks have different odds, you place money on both bets to guarantee yourself a profit. This is a growing thing. People are making crazy money. Oddsflex.com is your place to go, where you could purchase the software that does all the work for you, so you know where to put your money, where to put your bets, and guarantee yourself profits. So check it out, oddsflex.com today, and start earning a lot of money with very little effort. And speaking of betting, so I want to take a look at some of the games for tomorrow. By the time this premieres, the Saturday games will be underway, so I can't give you anything for the Saturday games. I was looking at the odds for tomorrow, and a couple of games stand out to me. So the Broncos giving 10.5 to the Chiefs. So Carson Wentz is starting for Kansas City. This looks like a gross exaggeration, this line. Now the Denver Broncos defense, they've run hot and cold a lot this season. And then Carson Wentz played well last year in a similar circumstance, the last game of the season last year. He's a former MVP. He's got ability. I know he's a jerk. He burns bridges wherever he goes. He's a coach killer in Philadelphia. Sandbag Doug Peterson. So the guy's he's just a bad person professionally. Like, he's just not a good professional. Bit of a baby, but he's got some ability. And I think 10.5 is a big spread. So that game jumped out to me. I'm going to hit the Chiefs 10.5 against the Denver Broncos in this one here. Miami Dolphins 1 to the New York Jets. The Jets are home underdogs. I know they've kind of laid down, but Aaron Rodgers, does he want to play another year? This one jumped out to me as well. The Jets were eliminated by the Miami Dolphins in their last, eliminated from playoff contention when they last played earlier this season. I think the Jets are going to be motivated to hand it back to Miami at home. Season finale. It's going to be very cold tomorrow. This is not an ideal setup for the Miami Dolphins. So obviously they no Tua Tagovailoa in this one. I like the Jets getting one at home underdogs tomorrow. And then finally, the Buccaneers 14 to the New Orleans Saints. Listen, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are not going to be denied in this game. They have to win to get in. They're going to run up the score. The Saints don't stop anybody. They have completely laid down. Baker Mayfield is playing at an unbelievable clip. Believe me, he cost me a fantasy football championship. He is as hot as any quarterback in the league. They're motivated to get the ball to Mike Evans so he could reach the 1,000-yard plateau again for his career, to continue that unbelievable, underrated streak to begin his career with 1,000-yard seasons. I think the Buccaneers giving the 14 to the Saints is the way to go in this one. So those are my 3 picks. The Jets getting 1, the Bucs giving 14, and the Chiefs getting 10.5 for Sunday football. All right, so a couple of emails I wanted to go through today. You can email me, the Fantasy Sports Boss at rangerfan.com. Rangerfan28 at yahoo.com. Make sure you give me your name and location, and I will use those questions on future podcasts there. All right, so we'll start off with John and Deal, New Jersey. Fantasy Sports Boss, what is your top 5 for 2025 fantasy football? All right, so these lists are already starting to be formulated. A lot of the pundits like to put out their first lists for 2025, and I'm pretty much in conjunction with that. I've done my early homework as well. To me, the top 2 are clear in Bijan Robinson and Jamar Chase. I ultimately think Jamar Chase is going to be the number 1 pick in most PPR leagues, and he should. He fell way too far in 2024 drafts because of the contract drama. He's going to be the number 1 guy. I think Bijan Robinson, certainly you can make a case for him to be number 1. I think there's no more restrictions. The Tyler Algier thing that's fallen by the wayside. I think Bijan is the clear number 2 to begin 2025 drafts. As far as the other 3, I like Justin Jefferson. He proved himself quarterback proof at Sam Darnold. I know we were a little hesitant with him as well. I drafted Amon-Ra St. Brown over him, and I drafted CeeDee Lamb over Jefferson in 2 of my leagues as well. You can't quibble with either one of them, but Jefferson was terrific again this year, and again, if Sam Darnold comes back, I think he's going to have another monster season. CeeDee Lamb is a top 5 guy in my opinion. We saw what he did with Dak Prescott in 2023. Prescott gets hurt this year, but Lamb still produces a high-end wide receiver too. Just the splash plays weren't there. And then he hurts his shoulder at the end and doesn't play in a championship week, which was tough. But I think CeeDee Lamb is as good as any receiver in football. He's going to be right there, top 5. And then Saquon Barkley. But here's the thing with Saquon Barkley. There's a lot of red flags, a lot of negatives in my opinion when it comes to Barkley next season. For one, he's going to be 27. 2, he didn't catch the ball at a really high rate this season. Now, it's not an indictment on him, but like I said earlier, mobile quarterbacks like Jalen Hurts don't throw to their running backs a lot. All right, so Barkley, capable of more, but he didn't catch the ball as much as you wanted him to this season. And that's going to continue with the mobile Hurts at quarterback. So that's number 2. That's another red flag. 3, the tush push did not go away. Jalen Hurts piled up the rushing scores again, which came at the expense of Barkley to a degree. Now, Barkley still scored a lot of touchdowns on the ground, so that was good. Sort of like Lamar Jackson throwing a ton of touchdowns and Derrick Henry still collecting a bunch on the ground. So this could work, both Hurts and Barkley scoring rushing touchdowns, but nonetheless, Every time Hurts scores from in close, it's at the expense of Barkley. Number 4, this was a big workload year for Barkley. This is a guy who's no stranger to injury. I'm worried about Barkley holding up physically next season. So, a lot of times, especially older backs, when you get that really big workload, the next year they bounce. Not as effective. The average falls. They get hurt. That's what I'm worried about with Barkley next year. That's what I was worried about with Christian McCaffrey this year. After 2 straight seasons of very heavy usage, he face-planted this year and was just never healthy. I'm worried about that with Barkley next year. I'm going to be out on Barkley next season just for all those reasons, but he, without a doubt, is a top 5 guy. I don't think there's any question there. Jeff in Boston, Massachusetts, Malik Nabers or Brian Thomas for 2025. All right, so both LSU guys. Reminds me of Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. Unbelievable. Both guys slam dunk draft picks this year. Especially Thomas, my goodness. Now, Nabers went off in the Fantasy Football Championship. Brian Thomas went off the entire playoff slate, especially the second half of the year. Love both of them for next year. But if I had to pick one, I would choose Brian Thomas over Nabers. I think he's got the better quarterback situation with Trevor Lawrence. I know it's been rough the last year or so, but the Giants have nobody right now. It could be Drew Lock. They could bring Lock back to start the season. Even if they draft Cam Ward or Shadur Sanders, they move up to get him, or they make a trade for J.J. McCarthy. I'm a little leery on Malik Nabers. Now, if the Vikings let Sam Darnold go and the Giants sign Sam Darnold, then I probably would switch to Malik Nabers. I would like Darnold more than Trevor Lawrence. But I think both guys are late first-round picks, early second-round picks. I don't think you can go wrong with either one of them, but I would choose Thomas. All right, Steve, Lakeland, Florida. What do we think of Ashton Jeanty and his fantasy football potential? All right, so I don't think Jeanty is Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley. We all know about all the hype with those two guys when they were coming out of Penn State and Texas. But this guy is amazing. He 30 touchdowns, 2,600 yards this year from Boise State. He can catch the ball, explosive runner. Depending on where he ends up, I'm going to be very curious there. Now, I'm not using a first-round pick on. This is not Ryan Matthews or, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, those two who we all reached on collectively in fantasy when they came out because of the opportunity at hand. But one thing that we learned this year is no matter where they were drafted, rookie running backs will be a factor at some point if the situation is right. Looking at Chase Brown, looking at Tyrone Tracy Jr., all right? Looking at Bucky Irving. All 3 of those guys balled the fuck out, and all 3 were as good as any value play this season. I'm certainly going to be paying attention to Ashton Jeanty this for 2025. Ron in Cary, North Carolina, what are your opinions on Drake London with Michael Penix at quarterback? As you all know, I was all in on Drake London. He was my ride or die. I had him on all 3 teams. First half of the season was terrific. Kirk Cousins, and who had a long history of supporting wide receiver ones in fantasy, did a great job first half of the year with Drake London. London was scoring touchdowns. He was stretching the field. He looked really, really good. Then Cousins really, for whatever reason, struggled horribly once November hit. The interceptions piled up. The touchdowns completely evaporated. I don't know what happened there, but then he gets benched for Penix. Penix not asked to do much in that first game against the Giants because it was the Giants. Giants don't do anything unless, they have the number 1 draft pick to throw away. The last week was better. London got a bunch of targets. I do like the fact that Penix can stretch the field more than Kirk Cousins. I like the chemistry so far between the two of them. I drafted London as a wide receiver 2 in all 3 of my leagues. I'm going to look to do the same next year as my wide receiver 2. He's not going to be my anchor 1. Not that he was this year either. So that's how I view Drake London for 2025. So anyway, so that's, again, email me, rangerfan28@yahoo.com, and I'll share, your emails going forward, on the future podcast. And if there's anything you want me to talk about, make sure you put it in the comments section, or you can email me anything you want me to discuss during the course of the offseason. I'd be more than happy to, but I'm going to continue on with these rehashing of the players' seasons, and, there will be some more live streams, so just always make sure you have your notification bell hit as well. So anyway, guys, have a great rest of your day. Hope you enjoyed the podcast, and we will chat soon.